Welcome to the SuperHero Conversations, a podcast saga with innovation leaders who will be at Supernova, the #1 tech innovation event in Benelux, happening in the end of March 2025 in Antwerp, Belgium. I'm your host, Domenik, and joining me today are the two superheroes, Pieterjan, the co-founder and the CEO of Entourage, and Stan Callewaert, the co-founder and the CEO of Squire. Welcome, guys.
Hey,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Pieterjan, I would like to begin with you and your story. So let's roll all the way back to your childhood. What were the first kind of seeds of entrepreneurship that you mentioned? And did you already know that you will become an entrepreneur?
Well, as a kid, I didn't know I would become an entrepreneur. Even as a student or when I was at university, I never considered entrepreneurship to be like a path for me, probably because I wasn't overthinking what I was doing. I do know when I was young, I had high energy. So my parents always said like, this little one is always like, he has too much energy. So I think that helps. And second, I do think like already from a young age, I was always like organizing things, challenging myself, like whether it's in the like youth movements or, I would just be quite engaged in various projects, initiating a lot of things, like whether it's like parties or initiatives or, all of those things. So, if you ask me, did I know I wanted to become an entrepreneur? I always say, no, I didn't know it. Even at university, I didn't consider to become an entrepreneur yet. But I did know I wanted to do something interesting with my life and that I have a lot of energy and sense for, taking initiatives and maybe a bit of risk here and there. So.
But if you think about your kind of the first kind of steps, even organizing a party, it's entrepreneurship. Maybe you didn't understand it consciously at the time, but what would you say is the first experience of actually kind of making something yourself?
I would say that the first experience for me, making something yourself always starts with having a vision for the future or something that you want to achieve. And for me, I think the first time I really had that was like, we always had in the youth movement, like a small party every year where 50 or 100 other people would come from the neighboring like youth movements. And we wanted, I was a leader in the youth movement at the time. I said like, hey, like we used the money to go abroad, right? Or no, normally we would use the money to finance like camping in the Ardennes in Belgium. And I said like, hey, we want to go further or do something nice. We need more money. So let's, instead of having like 50 or 100 people, let's try to organize a party where there's like 300 or 400 people. And kind of then going through the motions of like, okay, we need better marketing. We need like a better DJ. We need like a venue. We need to organize ourselves for this amount of people. And then eventually, I think the party grew to like a party of I think it was at the peak 2,000 people or something, or 3,000 people. So, and that for years after that we started that, our scouts in Belgium, they could always do these amazing camps in summer, go through Eastern Europe, go to France, go to Spain, wherever. And so, yeah, I think that's the first time where I just like the fact that you have an idea and you put the bar quite high, make it quite ambitious. And then usually that gives a lot of energy to start working on it, at least for me. And then as you make progress, you're like, okay, you just take it step by step and realize things. And I've done many small things like that in my life. And then maybe a couple of, maybe bigger things like starting In the Pocket or Showpad or some of the other ventures or now Entourage. So.
It's interesting. So we did a podcast with Jürgen, and Jürgen Ingels, the founder of Supernova and SmartWin, also started with parties. So maybe to all the young people listening to us, maybe you should start organizing parties.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's some basic concepts in parties which is quite applicable to building a business, right? You need budget. You need to work with suppliers. You need to market. You need to take some risk as well, because if you're gonna rent a venue and if it's too big and you don't recoup the money, you have a problem. So it's like, I think there's some aspects to that can definitely help.
Stan, what about you? What were the first kind of stepping stones in your entrepreneurship mindset career?
That's a difficult one. I would say that it's started late for me as well. I think at ML6, I worked together with some great people that also started their own company now. Some examples are Maarten Callewaert and Frederik Stallaert from Paperbox, who really pulled me towards the commercial side, because up until that point, I would say I was more of a technical minded person. I had an engineering degree. I was good with maths, but also I think I'm a person that goes along well with many types of personalities. So maybe that goes back to the parties as well. I can talk easily to different kind of people. I would say that would be my strength, and that also helped me to like create bonds with people in the sales team of ML6, for example, where I used to work, which drove me more towards the commercial side, and that's where I really started picking up the entrepreneurial side. And yeah, many other people from ML6 also started their own company. So it was very inspiring to be around those people and then to do it myself eventually.
And if you think that you'll actually have a degree in computer science, more especially like in AI, and how did you end up doing sales?
Yeah, I was involved in selling a couple of projects in the beginning, also doing some project management. And as time goes over, you do it more and more. And then you get more involved into it. You get attracted to it. And then you just ask if you can do it as a full-time job. And then, it went really smoothly. It's not like a sudden change. It's a gradual change. And I would have to thank the people from ML6 for letting me do that, because that was very nice that you can just do different kinds of jobs there. So that was, I'm very grateful for that.
Let's talk about your kind of the first real kind of the bigger projects. Pieterjan, you were the founder of Showpad. Are the founder of Showpad. Yeah. Now it's in the everyday operations. You left the everyday operations. So could you tell me maybe the starting story? Because they are the most interesting, and these are the stories that people can mostly relate to. How did you start?
Yeah, for me, if I talk about Showpad, I have to go back to joining, for me, Netlog back in the day, probably, I don't know, 2005, 2006, something like that. I joined Netlog, was an early employee there, or at least in the early team, was focused on more the business development, partnerships. It was an amazing time. Netlog had just raised some money from Index Ventures. They were scaling, growing. For me, a great place to learn, and I got a lot of responsibility from Toon and Lawrence to do my thing. Build my first team. That's also how I met Louis, who did his internship from Vlerick in my team at the time. And then, I think I was approaching probably 3 years at Netlog, and I think Louis had just joined, and then we immediately clicked in terms of we started spending obviously a lot of time together. He was in my team. We had this passion for mobile, which was just at that time, again, we're talking now more than 15 years ago, but then the first iPhone was just out, iPad came out, there was this whole mobile revolution going on, and we said we realized that more and more companies would need all their products, their services, their content available on those devices. We knew some amazing developers who were at that time working at Netlog, who were the first to work on that technology. And that's when we made the step to become an entrepreneur. We started one of the first mobile app developers in Europe, called In the Pocket. Service business started immediately. Well, the first couple of months were tough, but then we started getting, the timing was right. We started getting some traction. And then as we got some traction, we quickly realized we're now within the pocket. Usually it's you build a product for a customer, and then once you deliver the product, you're off to the next project. But through working on those projects and ID, we came up with the idea of Showpad, and we quickly really realized this is this is an interesting idea. It's basically the first product of Showpad was a mobile app to make salespeople more productive on a sales show, on a trade show, on manning the booth with instead of giving leaflets or folders, they would be able to present content on a tablet, share that with a customer. And the timing was right. The product was awesome, simple, it worked, and we got commercial traction quite quickly. And then immediately from our first customers, we realized, okay, this can be, this is going to be really big. And I shifted my attention from In the Pocket together with Louis to basically full time on Showpad, while staying involved. And I'm still involved with In the Pocket, but then Showpad became my big focus for the next 11, 12 years. So basically for me, key moments were meeting Louis as a co-founder, and then also Peter, who was the technical brain behind Showpad. And then second was kind of true, basically shipping product, and a very simple product, which was an iPad application. It seems simple to make sales teams more productive on a trade show. We had the vision, okay, now we can build basically a platform that really can make sure that sales and marketing are more aligned, that they can work better together, that salespeople have the right content, that they can easily personalize that, present it, share it, that there's a lot of insights then for the marketing team. And we quickly signed up customers everywhere in the world. And I think, then the next 10 years grew the company to, close to 100 million at that time. So, it's a good journey.
And Stan, I want to tell our listeners a story how I first met you. It was actually in September 2024, and you were pitching an idea. It was not so long time ago. It was 5 months ago, 6 months ago. And now you're sitting here with a logo on your shirt with Pieterjan as your investor. And you pitched your idea quite directly, quite frankly. So could you tell me the transition period? As I understand, you were involved, working full time in the company. Where did you understand that? What was your mindset when you did understand that you want to start something?
I think I always had it a little bit in the back of my head. It's funny actually. My one half of the family are all entrepreneurs, but the other side are all engineers. So that's, I think, where my personality comes from a little bit as well. In the back of my head, I always thought that I would start my own company before I was 30. And then I suddenly was 30, but I had so much fun at ML6 that I never stopped to think about it. So I suddenly was 30 and I thought okay, if I don't do it now, then it might never happen. I had a lot of general practitioner friends, and I started talking to them. And from one thing came the next thing, and now we're sitting here. So,
Stan, could you tell our listeners what is Squire and what position are you in the market, and what kind of development stage are you in?
Yeah. So Squire automates or helps to automate the reports that general practitioners have to make for each consultation they do. So each consultation a general practitioner has with their patients, they need to write a report. It's mandatory by law. And now they do that both during the consultation using their keyboard, but also after the consultation. And they spend a lot of time on it. There's a report from the Minister of Health in Belgium that was published in 2023 that says that they spent 27% of their time typing and doing all kinds of administration, actually. And also in the same report, it says that 75% of the general practitioners, they have patient stops. So that means that patients can't, if they call the general practitioner, they can't go to them because they already have too many patients. So that's a real big problem in Belgium. And we actually want to reduce that administrative time that general practitioners have to make sure that there are less patient stops, and so that patients can call their general practitioners again and have access to them. Of course, it's only a small part of the bigger solution, but at least it will help. And so, yeah, we help the general practitioners making these consultation reports by using AI. So there's if you go on a consultation with your general practitioner, there is a microphone that then analyzes the conversation and automatically generates the report for the general practitioner, which he, of course, or she has to review afterwards before they put it in their official system.
Wow. I find it fascinating. So I think that's quite straightforward, but it's quite genius, I would say. And Pieterjan, when you first met Stan and when you first kind of heard the idea, what were the initial thoughts, the first thought that sparked to mind without knowing any more context?
Yeah, so for me, maybe important context is that I've been independent board member for one of the biggest, or probably I think the biggest healthcare software provider in Belgium. So who delivers, I think, software for, in terms of general practitioners, I think more than half of GPs in Belgium is using that software. So I know quite, I'm quite deeply involved in or embedded in and have some experience in the sector and what's going on. And I think obviously a big push there. I mean, there's a lot of what I would call great software, but which is in many ways legacy software, old school. Not always does. Is very useful because it helps make sure that if you go to the GP that you get reimbursed by the government, that you don't have to pay that much money, and that if you get a prescription that it immediately goes to the pharmacy. But a lot of those bigger players are struggling with we're not struggling, but they're looking at how can we apply artificial intelligence, AI, LLMs to make our business efficient. And the first time I met Stan and heard, he at that time, I think the first time we met, you were still you were kind of like, yeah, I want to, you wanted to do something with impact. You had several ideas, but this was kind of the idea that you already had like most worked on and most traction on, and then obviously quickly resonated with me because of kind of my background and experience at Corylus, where I was independent board member for over 4 years, and so and I think that's when we started talking, and the enthusiasm grew on seeing the opportunity as well of a solution which Squire is building, which on one side is something that's a GP, so in Dutch that's a huisarts, so a GP could use by themselves, and just decide like, hey, I need this, I want this. Or, I think also it's going to be important that there's already a lot of software out there. So, like always with these types of solutions, it's also important to develop good integrations, partnerships, think about how you can really accelerate your growth. And to the point of the distribution, for example, that obviously a part of distribution will be looking at what is possible with the more established, the bigger software players in that market today.
I find it that we live in fascinating times. When I first met Stan, it was September, when he had just an idea, nothing built yet, as I understand. And then we are sitting here already in the office. So Peter, maybe you could explain, you're the co-founder of Entourage. What is the structure behind Entourage, and what kind of pathway did you take with Entourage?
Yeah, I think initially when we started first talking, Stan said, yeah, no, I don't want to do venture studios. We're just looking for funding. But I think also kind of with my experience that kind of quickly shifted as well. Like, hey, studio might also be interesting. And I think Squire, we took a bit of a special approach with them. And I think that's the strength of Entourage. Is on one side, the idea of Entourage is we are a venture studio and a VC fund under one roof. The reason is, on one side, I believe traditional venture capital is dead in some way. I don't believe there's so many funds out there. There's quite a lot of money to be found as an entrepreneur. How are you going to differentiate as an investor? It's actually quite hard. And I think then one thing that differentiates Entourage, especially in Europe, is that we are what you would call a founder-led VC, which, obviously I have my track record as an entrepreneur. I also have my track record as an angel investor, and so do both of my partners who run the fund with me. So on one side we have Martin, who's focused full time on the venture studio, Martin Martier, and then on the other side we have Evert Beekman, who's a partner in the fund. And we said, okay, let's build a structure where we have a separate entity, which is Entourage Studio, and where we basically build, want to build the very best B2B SaaS businesses of the future, but in a hands-on way. So you're here in our offices, but you saw the room there. We have, big room where there's currently actually, if you would count it, there's actually 4 companies in the making there. And so that's where we build hands-on with the founders, but it's in a way, building companies, I can tell a lot about it. It's not that we're going to hold, the hand of the entrepreneurs, every day, or we want to create an environment where they're inspired, where they're challenged, where they have access to us, where we're going to we'll go as deep as they want in certain aspects of the product, or go to market, or help them on the, the branding, and in some ways as well founding the company, and in some ways as well founding co-founders, and sometimes we come up with the idea and we look for amazing people to help it build, founders to help it build with us, or in the way that we've done it now at Squire, it's where we meet, Stan, and he already has an idea as well of his co-founder in Inyas at the time, and we're kind of, okay, but they don't have the company yet, and we help them. Okay, let's, we founded the company together. We're I would say Squire is more kind of on the light or low touch studio track, I would call it, because Stan and Inyas are quite experienced already. They know very well what they want, but still we're going to be way more involved than a traditional investor. And so they're both in our studio, but they also raised capital from our fund, and I think that's, again, it shows kind of the strength of and where in the fund we have Entourage. The fund is probably, I think, the fund in Belgium with most entrepreneurs, B2B SaaS entrepreneurs in there. I think we have more than 40 B2B SaaS entrepreneurs who are investor in our fund, and then some of the best and really exciting family offices as well that our country has, and it's quite exciting. So it's a great, and the name Entourage, it kind of covers what it is. It's in some way it's my entourage, and it's the entourage of Martin and Evert, and it's we've built quite a strong network and building in the pocket, scaling Showpad. Before Entourage, I've done about 30, 35-ish angel investments. I was an early investor in Silverfin, in Henchman. We've invested with also Entourage in Aikido. So and those amazing group of entrepreneurs also continuously invest and pay it forward in other companies and attract talent, and so it's kind of a reinforcing circle of really interesting people doing really interesting things, and so that's maybe Entourage. I should practice my 1-minute pitch, but try to cover. So basically, but in summary, we're a venture studio and a VC under one roof. Venture studio is hands-on. VC, we're actually we didn't disclose it, but we did the second closing of the fund. So it's actually it's a 40 million euro fund. So it's to Belgium early stage VCs, that's quite nice. And we do pre-seed and seed tickets from 300K to like $1.5 million with the fund, And with the studio, that's basically building from the ground, ideas up from the ground mostly, but also occasionally working with companies and people like Stan. Or like Text with a K.com is one of our first studio companies as well that's gone on already to do great things. So,
do we have exclusive news that you raised a new round?
That I closed the second? Yeah, we decided. It's easy to always come in the newspaper, and I'm actually in some way I try to stay away.
So you're too cool for that already.
No, it's just like we did the second closing, which I raised in doing one email, and 5 days later we've done the second closing and raised. Yeah, so that's pretty nice. And it shows kind of the confidence people have in our team and the things that we're doing.
And Stan, could you tell us about how do you think Entourage helped you the most, and maybe your biggest struggles that you overcame that you feel that you wouldn't have overcome without the team?
Yeah. No, I really like the collaboration with Pieterjan. I think his background, what he already mentioned in the health space, really helped us. Also, in the beginning, we sparred a lot on what our vision was at the moment and how they thought about it, and we tried to iterate a little bit on it. So that was a very nice period. And nowadays, I think it's I admire it always how easy it is to access Pieterjan. I can just send a WhatsApp, and within a few minutes, I get a reaction. Usually, it's a thing that's on my mind, and that I'm like, okay, this is something we need to solve. Pieterjan, do you have any ideas? Can you help? And he always does his best, and
Yeah, and I don't think we always I always say as well to Stan and Injas, like at the end of the day, like I have my experience, I have my background, but it's not that I don't believe that even my feedback or my ideas is going to be the best idea. I always tell them, look, it's what I will share you from my experience, but you have to do with it whatever you want. And if you want to ignore it, fine. Like I'm never going to be an investor or a builder of companies in our studio where we're kind of like, we give a lot of, freedom, or I think entrepreneurs should have all the freedom to build the company they want to build and make the decisions they want to build. And, some week you need me a lot, or you're asking like a lot of input. And sometimes it could be that we don't hear each other for 4 days or 5 days, and that's fine. So, but I think the nice thing is we're here constantly together in this space. So, and that obviously opens a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. I fully agree with that. Yeah.
It's good. And Stan, if you could tell us about the state of the company. So, how many maybe EMTs you have now?
Yeah.
What are your focuses? What have you achieved since incorporating like a few months ago?
Yeah.
And maybe you could tell us what are your focuses, 3, 6, a year from now?
Yeah. I think since September, you mentioned it, that was like the moments we started building our product. And then we had like in the months after that, we had like our first people, the GPs that we really know well, that we onboarded on the platform, and we let them experiment with it to get some feedback and so on. There were a few. And then from the moment we launched, we got a lot of inbound from the press that we came in. So a lot of people are now registering on our website, wanting to test out the product. It's free at the moment still, so that helps as well, of course. We do that because we really want to iterate with the feedback from the general practitioners themselves. We get a lot of good product input. But it's also invite only at the moment, which means that they have to register on the website. Then I'll contact them and send them like a link where they can book a meeting in my agenda. And then we sit together for like 20 minutes just for me to explain the product, also build a connection with the GP a little bit so that we can, after that, each 3 weeks have a meeting to talk about the product and how it can be improved and how we can make it better for them. So at the moment, we're not focusing on like having huge numbers. We're not doing it the product-led way because we want to continue improving the product. At a certain moment, we will do that, but not at the moment yet. We're still looking for many other GPs to join. The more, the merrier, I would say. This is they can certainly join if they want to.
Let's touch a little on it. So you mentioned the product-led growth. You mentioned the distribution. We just had a podcast with Zong from Deliverect, but then we also have a really cool Belgian entrepreneur, Fabian, from Udo.
Yeah.
Fabian is really fond of product-led growth, and he concentrates on the product. Product is everything. Zong agreed that the distribution and the sales is the driving force behind. So it seems kind of the collision of the two kind of ways of growing. So what are your thoughts? What is the best way, and what would you recommend to the founders today?
It's a topic that always will stir some discussion, I believe. Actually, Showpad started as a product-led growth company. Like the very first version of Showpad was, people could come on our website, they could use it for free for the first, I think, 2 weeks or 30 days. They could sign up using a credit card. And actually, we've knew in the first years, we actually had quite some traction on that, with that strategy. I think then as our company evolved, as the product evolved, as our goals evolved in terms of how we wanted to grow, we shifted our strategy and focused more. We became definitely more sales-driven, sales-led organization, just because we were hunting, bigger deals, bigger contracts. Some of the bigger, Showpad customers pay us over $1 million per year in licenses, and to achieve those types of deals on a product-led growth basis, it's quite hard. So I think for me, it's not necessarily, I don't think one should exclude the other. I also heard that Fabian also said that they were doing more outbound now, while they didn't do that in the past, or they were experimenting with that. So, I think it's a natural cycle in some ways. And I see a lot of companies that start in a product-led growth way and can do really amazing things for a long time. And then at some time, they will maybe combine that with a more sales-led model without maybe stopping the product-led. We stopped that with Showpad, and in some way that's something that I believe if I would be able to change that, I would probably would. But it's also a matter of resources in terms of like when you're developing a product-led growth product is quite different from developing a product that you're doing enterprise sales with or close those big deals. So it's a matter if you have 100 engineers and you need to focus their attention, and then you have limited resources. So you have to factor in a lot of things. So, go to market, strategy, resources, focus. But personally, I'm actually a big fan of product-led growth companies because, it's true. I mean, you have to be focused on the product, and everything starts with, having an amazing product for me in terms of like, it's always easier to build to kind of add on a sales organization or a sales-led strategy or, more aggressive go-to-market outbound strategy on a product that already works and has proven itself and is easy to start using and onboard and where you can like upsell within the products your customers, for example. So for me, it's not like or PLG or. I think in the beginning, it's good to make some choices, but I think over time, I think you need to keep a flexible mind.
So the short answer would be, it depends.
Yeah, it depends.
That's cool. And Stan, could you give us an overview of the 5 months, 6 months that you worked on Squire? Maybe, since it's a super short time, when did you launch, and how much time did you spend on building the first MVP, and was it enough to go out in the market?
Yeah. So as Pieterjan said in the beginning, I was exploring multiple ideas actually. So during that time, I already contacted Inyas, which is my co-founder and CTO actually. He's a good friend of me, which I studied with during university. He went a technical route at Lighthouse, which he was a lead developer at. So I always, when I had an idea, I always talked to it with Inyas. And at the moment, I still had multiple ideas. But then in September, it started to become clear that I was going to focus on the idea, which is Squire now. And I started pitching it to Inyas. But the interesting thing is that Inyas, his girlfriend, is also a general practitioner. So he immediately understood what it was all about. We were talking, actually not far from here in a restaurant. We were talking about it, and then he said, "Okay, I will talk about it with my girlfriend." And then the morning after, I already received a text that he was very enthusiastic, but that he wanted to talk to some of his family before making the decision, of course. And then we met Pieterjan in the process as well. I think Injas did not leave Lighthouse at the time yet. But he already mentioned that he would do so while we were talking with Pieterjan. Pieterjan invited us. That was also a very nice period, I think. Pieterjan invited us for a couple of weeks to work together, like at the office.
Just sit together and kind of no strings attached, just
exactly.
Come and hang out.
Exactly. Which was a very nice period because it's just like giving each other feedback, also gaining a little bit of trust, because many investors say that they will give product feedback and that they will be really involved, but to really feel that, I think that really helped those weeks to feel that would happen as well. So that was very good. And then I think, we started going closer to each other, and then we noticed that it was going to happen.
But we sometimes compare it with, we have this concept when we launch new ideas with our studio that we, let potential entrepreneurs date with each other, so spend a bit of time, get to know each other. It's an important decision. Who are you going to entrepreneur with? But and on the other side, also for us, we do the same thing. I call it kind of dating. You get to know each other a little bit. You spend some time. You need to build trust. You need to build. I always say, if you want to build a big business, it's going to take you 10 years. I build a really big business, and normally with your first investor, you're going to be involved actually for those 10 years, maybe even longer. And then it's better. And for us, it's the same thing. We're going to be supporting those entrepreneurs a long time. So it better be, worth it, or like a relation that you can feel it's going to be rewarding. It's going to be, these are people who are hardworking, who are fun to be with, who share the values. And 100%, I think after a couple of weeks, we knew, okay, this is going to be fun.
That's really cool. And so when you spent a couple of weeks here, you already started kind of iterating and kind of developing the product. So how much time did it actually take you to build the first product and to launch?
I'm not a big believer of saying that a product is at a certain point. I think it's always iterative. You add feature by feature, you add thing by thing. So it's hard to say, like, at that point the product was that, or at that point the product was that. I think it just matured over time.
I think roughly speaking, probably in 4 to 6 weeks, you've built something from where there was almost nothing to something that you really could already start demo to like the bigger software providers or. So I mean that, to me, what I really like about Stan and Injas is they're like, when you say something or we agree on let's do this, it's like literally like the day later it's done, or they already make ultimately speed is like so important when you're a startup and when you're just starting. If you overthink things, I see a lot of people with like big words and big ideas and nice slides and great PowerPoints, but at the end of the day, it all, these are words and words, in what we do don't matter that much. It's about delivering, shipping, creating something, putting it out there, and then that also, like, sometimes it goes well and sometimes there's a bunch of feedback that comes back where you're like, oh, this is not good, but at least then you learn from that, And I think I think that's that's definitely one of the reasons why I really believe in Stan and Injas. They really, they build, they ship, they're not afraid to just do things and go out there and make it happen.
Wow, 4 to 6 weeks. This is. I think we live in incredible times. Imagine that you would say something like this even 10 years before, that you can actually build a product that you can already showcase. Of course, it has a super limited availability of the features,
it's still high
but
level.
you can actually show it And I do believe that this is the magic of 21st century.
Yeah, but I do have to say a lot of credit to Inyas for that. I think indeed speed is, I think one thing we certainly, as we scale the company, we certainly want to keep the speed as our company, I think, is now in a blue ocean. Certainly in Europe, the similar solutions exist, like in America and so on. But in Europe, it's really an untapped market. And I think it's going to become very competitive. So speed will be very important to us. And I think that's what we need to keep doing. It will be very important.
Okay, so the first 5-6 months is, just building product sales. So could you please give us an overview of your plans for the next 3-6 months and maybe a year, 10 years?
He will not share all the secrets. We know there's a lot of people listening.
No, we won't go too deep into that, but I think it's a matter of just having a lot of adoption. I think it's spreading the product. I think a lot of general practitioners and other healthcare providers talk to each other. They all know each other. So if you can make sure that you have a good product and they talk to each other about it, I think it will spread. And of course, we don't only have ambitions to deploy it in Belgium, but also in other countries. So I think that might give a hint to where we want to go.
Yeah. To standpoints, I think really with Squire, what's going to be important, if you're building something in healthcare, it needs to be, doctors need to trust the solution. You need to, there's a lot of things. You can build the first version quite quickly to just demo the technology. But then I think the differentiation of Squire will be that it's like, there's a ton of options in terms of storing data, not storing data, keeping it confidential, anonymizing data of patients, providing all the controls to the GPs or the parties that we're going to integrate with, making sure that it's like embedded in the daily workflow of like a lot of GPs today are like on their laptop typing notes all the time during a conversation. That's actually what I really like about Squire, is that through that technology, because it listens in the background and it transcribes the meeting, is that GPs can have a way better interaction and focus on the patient instead of focusing on their notes, because the notes happen automatically in the back and they're structured, they're coded, but to build, so you can really prove, I think actually they've already proven that the technology is there and it's already working with like different accents. We're going to do multiple languages, but then to get something like this in like a stage where you can really put it in production at like a massive scale or integrate it with big GPs is going to, or big software providers is going to take some time, but those guys are just working literally day and night. I think I can be here quite early in the office and they will be here usually before me, and if I leave, a lot of the times they're still there. So it's like I think that's also important. So
And if we think about this industry, it's the medical industry is one of the most conservative industries out there because there's risk involved. And Stan, I'm sure you have this question all the time. What about privacy? Yeah. And what about the whole confidentiality of the notes and so on? It's such a sensitive information. So what do you usually answer to those kind of remarks?
Yeah, we put a lot of time in it, of course. I think from the beginning onwards, we already put a lot of time in it. And I'm very lucky to have Rob from ML6 as well supporting me. He is the DPO of ML6, but also the DPO of Squire.
So DPO is Data Privacy Officer, I
Protection
guess.
Officer.
Protection Officer.
Data Protection Officer. So yeah, he has a lot of experience. He's the DPO of basically all the companies that came out of ML6, Paperbox, Human, a lot of other ones as well. So he has a lot of experience and he helped us set up the process. GDPR compliancy is of course a very big thing for us. But we also do a lot of other things in the background, but maybe the competition or the potential competition will be listening as well. So I won't spoil all the secret sauces here as well.
Yeah, I think it's a big differentiator for Squire in terms of what happens in the background, and yeah, what kind of certainties and security it provides for people working with us. So.
Wow. I feel like everybody, all the competitors should subscribe to the LinkedIn of Squire and then, find out what's happening.
Find out one day,
Yes.
or visit their doctor.
Yes. That's true. Don't give strategies.
No.
Don't give strategies.
but obviously we don't want to make sure, we hope everybody stays healthy. But
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But could you tell me if it's a physical microphone that you place inside the office?
Yeah.
Is the microphone kind of an important part of the process, or is just the hardware that you kind of outsource? Because as soon as it's hardware involved, scalability is at risk, and then the investors start asking, "Oh, we don't want to do hardware," and stuff like this. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think now in the early days, the hardware is important because we want to make sure that we can iterate as well as possible and we can test things with the quality we like. But of course, in the long term, I think the mic will become irrelevant and that it will be a pure software product.
And to make it clear, I mean, Squire doesn't develop the microphones themselves, right? So it's just Jabra, or we'll give some recommendations to the doctors on what hardware to use. But ultimately, I think mics are pretty scalable in the sense that, for 30 euros you have, or I don't know, how much is it? Jabra?
80.
Okay,
but now we're going for the really high quality to make sure that we can do it as well as possible. But I think as time progresses, that cost.
But let's say for 50 or 80 euros you have a mic, you plug it in the computer, and I think what Squire will solve is like, is this a good, test the microphone, does it work, is it a good one, how do you filter like some of the ambient noise out of it, and distinguish between what is a conversation what is a conversation that's happening here, what's maybe noise that isn't relevant for the transcription.
We can, if you have hard times, we can lend you those microphones.
Those will be really good.
Those we'll listen to the podcast and then evaluate. But I think they look at least very, very premium. Yes.
I would like to ask about parallel working. Stan is right now ultra focused, ultra concentrated. Pieterjan, you have multiple companies that ping you all the time. So do you think that's the only kind of phase of your life or your career that you can kind of defocus is when you already achieved something and built one company, and when you're not kind of operationally involved in everyday operations of that company, and then you can diversify, or you could get inspiration from other companies and combine them?
Personally, I think to achieve something great, you need a ton of focus and for a sustained amount of time. I wouldn't have been able to build Showpad to what it is if I wouldn't be like crazy amount of focus and obsession and time that you spend on it. Having said that, while I was building Showpad, I was still involved with In the Pocket. I was doing the last couple of years with Showpad some angel investing. I always had some quite a... but that was more kind of like, I would call it a hobby, like that was it was kind of like my way of like, if you go super, super deep into something, then also at some points, like you actually need some inspiration and some, your brain needs a bit of oxygen. But I do believe that, I look at this as well. And even in Entourage now, yes, I mean, my life is now all about like, I'm switching context like 10 times a day because usually on any given day I'll be WhatsApping or emailing or calling different companies, different founders, new exciting portfolio companies or existing companies, and I'm still involved with Showpad. And so I try to, like, for me, focus is like definitely a big challenge. For me, one of the best things that can happen sometimes if I forget my phone in the morning, and then if sometimes I will basically on purpose leave my phone at home just because I know I will be able to do much more work and the world will not explode or not, in a day if I'm not reachable. So I will. Then it does suck a little bit when you come home in the evening and there's like a exploded WhatsApp, but then usually you think, a lot of the things during the day sometimes also solve themselves. Like people are so used to like tack tack tack. So it's a mix, because I like to be approachable, reachable. Like maybe Stan said earlier, I can react quite quickly. I'll jump on things, but it comes at a price. And sometimes I do have to protect myself between like the overload and messages, and everybody wants a piece of you, and I need this, and every startup's looking for money. So it's and you have to be it's focus is definitely the new gold in some way. I feel like it's so hard. And I'm also easily distracted because I like new interesting things. So I'm always working on that. Like, and then sporting, living healthy, getting some good amount of sleep does help with staying focused as well. Like,
so imagine if Pieterjan can leave his phone in the house, don't take it. Imagine what other people can do. I think it's definitely showcases that
people will still email you. They will figure it out, and WhatsApp's still on your laptop as well. So you have to be careful. But yeah, I try to do. I mean, sometimes it works, like not having the phone, not looking at the phone. Like
And Stan, maybe you could share. So you were ultra focused. What kind of helped you to keep that focus, and also family. A lot of people have family that needs you to go to the grocery store, cook some meals. I don't know, look for the grandchildren, children, cousins, and so on. So how to keep the balance in that, or were you full in until 12 in the evening in the office and you just didn't care?
Yeah, I don't have any children yet, so that's maybe good in this phase. But I do have a girlfriend that actually helps me a lot in the household as well. I try to do things on Sunday, so that's my free day in the week where I cook and where I run as well, because I think that one run in the week helps me a lot. But for the rest of the days, I basically work from early until late. Also, the people who work at Squire, they also work very late. So we have very motivated people at the moment in the company. That's what I really like. And yeah, I think it's just basically thinking about it the whole day and just trying to do what you think is best for the company. So
I just love it. I love to hear that people can be so kind of obsessed in a good way, that they can concentrate all of their kind of brain power on one thing. But the thing that you've been telling, that you're super kind of in on Squire, when you start hiring people, you cannot expect people to be as much involved in the company as the founders. Maybe Pieterjan, you could also kind of suggest, when you hire your kind of, outside the core team already, when it's kind of workers that you hire with the worker mindset, how do you manage to keep your founder mode all in, and a person that takes this as a 9-to-5 job?
Yeah, I mean, that's always something I even always struggled with. I remember in the early days, even with Showpad, like, I think fair to say that probably the first 20, maybe even, I would dare to say, maybe even 50 employees at Showpad were all incredibly hardworking. They would go the extra mile, and even today, still a lot of people go the extra mile. But it changes once, if you're all together in one office and everybody's hustling, working hard, and that's why I like office culture in some way, because it does. And it's doesn't, for me, it's not necessarily about the hours, and a lot of people think about hustle, but it's about like the speed at which you can execute, the speed at which you bounce ideas and you can course correct little things. I just feel in a remote environment, for example, that's a lot harder. So for me, really, Louis and myself in the early days with Showpad, we were very focused on building an amazing culture, on building that. Yeah, we were 7-7 very early, very late, and then it's infectious if people then see how this is working. But you cannot expect that of even of the early employees, you cannot expect that they do the same hours. And I mean, when you start a company, ultimately in the early days with the 2 or 3 co-founders, you usually have almost 100% of the company, and people who join have maybe a little bit of equity. but it's different. And so you cannot expect that. But creating the right culture, creating accountability, hiring people who are driven by that, who have the same obsession, passion in their field for your company. Yeah, there's no better feeling than finding people like that. And I would really, in an interview, make it super clear that, especially in the early days, like, guys, this is not like, because usually people would already see that we would interview them late in the evening, early in the morning, in the weekends, and that will already signal something like, okay, those guys are actually working on a Sunday, or they're working, they're interviewing me at 9 p.m. in the evening. So it's like, means they're still working. As it evolves, it's about setting expectations, creating a culture of accountability, and then also realizing that there's some, at the end of the day, I don't care about the hours. I care about the vibe that people give, the energy that they give into the company, the work, or the quality work that they do. And yes, I mean, in the early years, we've had some employees who maybe had more kind of, call it 9 to 5-ish way of living, where they would show up at 9 and maybe go home at 5 because they had kids or they had stuff to do. But then they would actually come back online at 7:30 or 8, and so and their work would be amazing. And so then for me, it's not necessarily about being physically constantly in the office. It does help. I mean, it is amazing to work closely together with people in the same room. I like it. I'm just a big fan. I mean, that's also why with Entourage we create that environment where, in our studio at least, people can be, we are here as well. I'm spending also, like, I would say, a good amount of time in the office here, and people will see as well that I'm here quite a lot, and I'm accessible, and I'm working. But with the studio companies, you see them. Yeah, everybody's working hard, and it's infectious.
Yeah, I think it gives a lot of energy. If you're next to a colleague and he says, "Oh, I deployed a new version," and everybody is celebrating, or I come out of a call, another GP that joined the platform. So yeah, it's different than if you would see it on a Slack channel, I think. So yeah, I agree with that. That opinion.
And obviously there's companies who do great things remote, and I think remote is part of the culture today. Having some flexibility, and I will also work, sometimes a morning from home if something needs to happen, or if I have to pick up the kids, or it's about flexibility as well. But definitely a big pro office culture for sure, in person.
And Stan, I would ask you about your kind of motivation role as a motivator here in Squire. So you have 4 people now, and some freelancers as well. I'm sure you will grow quite rapidly, quite soon.
We'll see.
Hopefully. So, what do you think that motivates the people around you? Because you're the kind of the CEO, the person that is the driving force behind it. What is the ways you motivate your team to keep up with the pace?
I think for now, it doesn't take a lot of effort. I think of Pieterjan in bigger stages of the company, it takes probably a lot more effort. But at the moment, it's just, I think as we are hiring people, we just look at their personality, look if they're willing to go the extra mile. So it's usually already in themselves to like do that. So I don't have to do a lot of things. We just mention things if things are happening, and then we give each other a high five now and then. But for the rest, I think people are just doing it. So I wouldn't take a lot of credit in that sense.
Okay. I think that's not for long. When you hire your 50th employee, 100th employee, then you would need to keep up the motivator, pull in the David Goggins inside of you. So Peter, I have a question for you. So I feel like in each company there's one person that takes the lead, even if there are 3 co-founders, for example. You've seen many companies. Is it that a person 2 people, 3 people can share the responsibility of actually managing the company, or there should be always one person who has the full responsibility, and that's kind of on top of this pyramid?
I think there should be one person. I think that's most straightforward. I think it doesn't mean that with different co-founders you take on different especially as the company grows and when, I'll give the example at Showpad, it was very easy in some way. Louis was fully focused on product and engineering and was really visible and inspiring that team and working very hands-on with that team every day. I've always, since day one at Showpad, taken a more general and broader role, maybe a little bit more focused on the go-to-market side and general management. But Louis and myself I would always discuss the important decisions I would take there and make sure I have his buy-in, and vice versa. Louis would discuss all the important product and technical decisions that we were evaluating. And so, but I think it's good both for internal reasons, external reasons, that there is, like, Louis and myself always had the agreement where the buck stops with me, and there's, that you agree that if for some reason you would ever disagree between the two of you, that one person can actually make the final decision. I think that helps. And actually, it never had to use that with Showpad, but that was like really a real agreement between Louis and myself that, okay, PJ's, we were actually 3 co-founders, but yeah, PJ is the CEO. And if for some reason a decision needs to be made, like we trust PJ to make that decision. But that trust then also comes with, like, you have to deal with all the shit that comes with that responsibility. And that also means that you're going to spend more time talking with investors. That's going to mean that you're going to spend more time on fundraise. That means you're going to spend more time on the shit that's happening in the company, whether it's HR stuff or other, problems that you will have to, you want to own those decisions. So you have to find, in my opinion, it's usually more, that means as well sometimes, I mean, and in Showpad for me, that meant that I sometimes was, let's say maybe between Louis and myself, I was definitely maybe sometimes the less popular co-founder in some way, because I was usually the person announcing the bad news or and not that Louis didn't announce bad news. A lot of, we've had sometimes quite some bad news to do, but in general, that's the result. But I feel that worked really well for us. We had a good understanding of how the dynamic was between the two of us. You make good agreements between each other, between investors, between the executive team. And then I think and I don't say, I mean, I've seen co-CEO-ships and things like that work, but in reality, there's usually always also one person that has maybe more weight in some of these decisions. And I think it's just clearer, again, internally, externally, to have that. Like, I feel that works. For me, that works best. And there's always how you say it, like other examples that will maybe prove me wrong. But I think in general, I think it's good to have one person.
And does it also bring kind of a notion that one person should have the majority stake in the company?
No. For me, that's actually, Louis and myself are always equals in that, for example. And it depends. You see it now. I see it a bit more often now in certain cap tables. I'm a big fan in terms of when you're 3 co-founders to have kind of an equal split, but it also does depend on the context, right? Like maybe one person already has worked 2 years on this idea. Maybe there's, so if there's good reasons to have a different setup, then fine. But I think in general, if you start a company with the 3 and you're kind of equals, then I see, even though maybe one person is the CEO, I don't think that person should have more equity. Like that makes no sense to me. So,
but if you say that a person has more responsibility, more shit to deal with, or what is the agreement?
But that doesn't necessarily, dealing with that shit that does not necessarily create a ton of value for the company, right? It's shit that needs to be solved.
Okay.
But it could be that then the amazing VP product is creating crazy products that generate a ton of value for the company. So for me, equaling, like taking responsibility for the shit, or maybe even investor conversations, doesn't necessarily equate to like generating a massive amount of equity value. It will, at the end of the day, building a startup is about creating value, creating equity value. And so for me, but it's always like, I think the most important thing for me to do is when you start a company is really have open discussions about that. And I think that's where investors and VCs also help. And if you get a VC on board, if you're on the VC track, if you want to do the VC track and you have a good investor on board, it also creates a ton of alignment and there's a bunch of mechanisms that usually are introduced, and good lever, early lever, bad lever. What happens if somebody stops earlier? Those things should have an impact on equity, on, you should make good agreements there. But I like at the start, at least unless there's good reasons as well, that there's at least the cap table needs to be very logical for me. Else, I try to solve that.
I do believe that it's fascinating insight that you both give us. So maybe we could wrap up our conversation with a few quick questions. What is the biggest thing that is stopping you right now? What is the biggest problem that you are solving today for both of you?
For me, not having enough time in a day. Hard to solve, but try to be focused on where value is created. But that, I think time is always my there's not enough hours in a day.
Mm-hmm. But if we think about Entourage, what do you think is the biggest problem that is stopping you from becoming a $1 billion fund, the biggest and the best fund in Belgium?
I'm not necessarily, I don't know, I don't want to build $1 billion fund, because I think there's diminishing return in the sense of at least percentage wise, I don't want to build a massive fund. I would say in terms of building and scaling companies, it's talent and attracting enough talent. For me, that's the biggest limiting factor. Finding really talented, hardworking people. There's a lot, but then they need to match with kind of the ideas and the things we want to build, and that's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of talking. It takes time. Cool. So I'm back to time.
Stan, about you?
Yeah, I would say in our part, I would say product, but it has to do with the talent part, because you cannot just throw 50 engineers on this thing and expect that everything goes smoothly. So at the moment, we're really focusing on building the product. But I think it needs a solid base before we can extend it to a lot of other parts. So now there are a few people working on it, with doing their best and moving it forward. But I would say product is a key to going quicker.
What is the thing that you want to improve in your CEO-ship? You as a leader, what is the weak point?
So there's maybe a couple of aspects. So one, I'm not, Entourage doesn't have a CEO, there's partners. So I'm the general partner, but I'm just a partner in the fund. What is the, what do I want to prove? Or what was the question again there?
What is the weakness of yours?
Weakness. The weakness is, again, it's hard to scale talent. I will always say the weakness of Entourage or the weakness of myself?
Of yourself.
Of myself? I'm always, I try to do too many things, and so I always have to slow myself down.
And it's time for you.
I think I sometimes go a little bit too hard, but that's very good that Inyas is with me. He sometimes stops, thinks a little bit deeper, and pulls me back a little bit if I tend to go too fast or make decisions too fast. So, yeah.
And the last question, since we have the podcast about superheroes and superpowers, so what is your superpower? What do you think you're the best in the world?
In the world, I wouldn't say.
No. You need to say, you are the best in the world at something. That's definitely true. You're unique. So what is that you think you're the best at?
I think one trait, I maybe already mentioned it in the beginning, but I think I can talk with a lot of people. So both the engineers on a very deep level, but also more commercial people on a very deep level. I think, I can just easily talk to everybody, and that helps me also to build connections with people. So
fantastic.
Yeah, and I think the best in the world, I don't know, but I do believe I can kind of create excitement with people around what they're building, what they're doing, and kind of like infuse people with enthusiasm, a belief in themselves that maybe they didn't see or didn't believe yet. So I think that's one of probably my strengths, I believe, as an investor, that you want to make people believe that they're going to do exceptional things. And to believe that, it's also something that I then I'm looking for that they're doing something I can believe in. So,
Guys, I believe this was a fantastic conversation, both useful and a practical sense and a sense of motivation. So thank you so much for this conversation. If you want to meet, people like this, people who have the motivation and the progress and they know something, definitely come to Supernova. That is happening on the 27th and the 28th of March in Antwerp, Belgium, and hopefully to see you all there. Thank you, guys.
yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. It was great.
Great conversation.